So yeah, Rob Mennell, these days I'm mostly a sleazy corporate guy, but I started life as a massive nerd. Now I'm a closet nerd, I guess. Bit of a background, army, infantry, but ended up getting pulled kind of into the intel world and using technology on accident at first and then on purpose in terms of machine learning to solve some analytical problems. James, much more interesting than I am.
Rob is very modest and also very handsome, so he gets away with whatever he wants to say. My background is kind of interesting. I took a strange career path. I like to tell people I just stayed in enough Holiday Inns and I'm here, but that's not too succinct. So I started my career actually going to architecture, but then my major turned into girls. So then I ended up going to the Air Force, and I was a cryptologic linguist for 4 years. And my only duty station, everyone asks, "Did you see the world? Awesome, you were at different duty stations." One and only duty station was at Fort Meade. So I started my career at NSA, which was a great boost. And then, similar to Rob, I got drawn into the industry, and I've been with government contracting ever since. Smaller and smaller companies, and I noticed with smaller companies we could do more with less and actually add more value to the federal government, which is all the way to today, that's why I'm a company of one, to actually let's add the most value.
Actually, you split your time with a few different organizations, so you could be a company of less than one. So
that's true. I'm a fractional CTO at a couple of other startups. And the most interesting one, and I'll shut up, is believe it or not, there is a UFO startup called Enigma. And I would suggest anyone who has an iPhone device, download Enigma. There is real evidence that people are submitting of definitely UAPs, definitely strange things. And the government use case there is very, very interesting. It's a 12-person firm out of New York City right now. So that is actually my main job.
Shameless plug.
Shameless.
Oh, thanks. So I'm not maxing out of it. Or it's just me. All right. So real quick, we'll do a quick survey here. Well, first question: who is sick of hearing about AI ML? Anyone? Yeah. Yeah, me too. Safe space. But it's here, and unfortunately, or fortunately, it's something I'm going to have to reckon with for a while. So to start off, just on a kind of baseline, our understanding and some of the common definitions of AI ML. Artificial intelligence is a very, very broad definition. It's really just a field of any type of intelligence that is not organic in nature, really. That can be mechanical based, it can be the typical machine learning that's most popular now. And of course, it encompasses all sorts of things like generative AI. Machine learning kind of drills down from AI a little bit. It's the computer algorithms that you're most commonly engaged with. If you see Amazon telling you what you want to buy because they know everything about you, machine learning. And then a further subset of machine learning is generative AI. That's the ChatGPTs of the world. That's the DALL-E image generations that use algorithms as well. They've studied us a lot, and they can now take over human functions. Maybe not perfectly, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but it's a thing and it's here. Any questions on this so far? And again, we want to make this more of a discussion than us preaching, because there's too much preaching AI and all going on now, and pontification. So.
And to drive that point home, I would say I went to AUSA, which is the Army's giant conference over here downtown at the convention center. Every single company, even Salesforce, has become an AI company. Suddenly, it's just AI everywhere. So I think we are at peak AI, and we need to, actually get to real applications of AI.
Yeah, we'll get there. How did we get here?
So everyone's probably familiar with Alan Turing now, based on a few of the movies that were out. He was really the father of AI. If you think about the thinking machine and you think about the Turing test, you know, he was one of the first people to think about, you know, what if a computer could think like a human? Right? That was back in the 50s. Believe it or not, the first chatbot was in the 60s called Eliza. So this is not new. You know, what is always new. It's just our CPU and compute has gotten a lot better. Everybody in this room probably remembers when Deep Blue beat Kasparov in chess, right? That was 97, which is actually a long time ago. You know, in my head, I think everything is 5 years ago, right? Music, everything. It's like, oh, that was just 5 years ago. It's actually a long time ago now. And then I actually forgot about this one. IBM's Watson won Jeopardy in 2011.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I actually I was watching Jeopardy too, and I forget what that one. And then if you remember, you know, AlphaGo, and I didn't know about the game Go until Google's AlphaGo, you know, beat the best Go team in the world. And then, you know, actually in 2018, I was with a startup called Primer AI, and the tagline there, believe it or not, it sounds silly now, robots that read and write, okay? And it's In-Q-Tel funded and very, very interesting, and it was a bunch of Berkeley graduates that right after the quintessential paper on the modern form of AI came out on transformers, and NLP modeling where you could get abstractive AI, we call it, which is it's actually generating content instead of just analyzing and summarizing content, right? So that was kind of like 2018 marked that new age, the new flavor of AI. And Primer's still doing fine, okay? But yeah, ChatGPT is definitely cutting into a lot of those companies that were doing that for the past 4 years. And then, yeah, fast forward today, you know, we need to talk about it, you know, OpenAI. We found that, you know, they're going to be trillion-dollar companies that are doing all these things. And the scary thing for me, I can't tell yet if it's going to be a winner-take-all market. And if it's a winner-take-all market, there's going to have to be government regulation, and it's going to have to become a public service and a public good, similar to, you know, electricity is subsidized. You know, it's going to be like the power grid, but for thinking with machines. There's no other way to do it, right? And we're going to shift to this technocracy if it's a winner-take-all market. And if it's not, I mean, it's too early to tell right now. But I'm confident that we actually have a lot of smart people in the government on the regulation side. It's just moving very slowly, right? So yeah, that's hopefully, you know, and I'm happy to deep dive further, but I don't want to bore everyone.
I mean, James, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask, is that, you know, as we go through this whole new world of artificial intelligence, how do you manage it? How do you regulate it so that it is a level playing field? Because I don't see it being a level playing field. And I think it's like what you said, you're going to have the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots are really going to be significantly, you know, handicapped. And again, I don't know if it's too early to ask that question, like you said, because I thought we were in the infancy stage, but it sounds like we've sort of passed that, right?
I don't know. In some ways, we are definitely in infancy of all this. If you think about how little the rest of the world has had to truly interact with this technology,
Exactly.
we've only begun to see that. In other ways, though, you know, as James said, this technology, it's new, and the scale of it is unprecedented. But in other ways, it's not just, you know, OpenAI isn't the only show in town. So there are open source models that we'll talk to a little bit about that allow literally anybody in this room can download these open source models and make their own chatbot that is, you know, completely licensable to anybody. So
yeah, there's a couple really good ones, and they've wrapped around. You don't need to know code now to actually download an application, and then you can download one of the open source models and then use it and chat with it. And they work, you know, 80 to 90% as powerful as OpenAI right now. I know because I use them every day to do everything from coding, work. Makes me from a 1x developer to a 10x developer. I'm not a 10x developer, right? Two, I'm generating emails, contracts, proposals, and work agreements with people with it, and I'm not using OpenAI. I'm using these open source models. And so I'm a big believer in the open source community that I think it's actually going to democratize a lot of this, right? And it's more of like, if you think about Google and the FANG companies, so to speak, the Apple, Netflix, LinkedIn's, and Meta, the issue with the regulation is a double-edged sword, right? Where they may be pushing for regulation to protect them, right? And they're, how much did Google spend last year in lobbying, right? And it's millions and millions of dollars. And so that's actually most scary to me. So we could have the wrong regulation that is going to limit the innovation from the open source side from startups. At the same time, I've been talking to a lot of VCs recently, 20, 30 different VC firms, and they're all investing in these brand new AI startups, right? So they're trying to get that competition there, right? And they're trying to get that innovation there. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting right now. I will say, if you look up at least the laws on the internet, right? They haven't been updated since 2012. They are sorely out of date. Like, imagine how much has happened in terms of consumer protection laws, in terms of child protection laws, in terms of content moderation laws. Meta got slapped on the wrist in 2018. They hired 17,000 Accenture contractors to moderate content. There's 2 billion posts being generated on Meta every day. Those 17,000 people are going to go through all that? They're picking and choosing randomly. It's interesting that even Meta chose humans to do that versus building out their own AI to auto-moderate, right? I could talk about this subject a lot, so you hit on a really good point.
Yeah, that's a good one. Any other questions on this? You and Ryan Thompson? All right, how does this impact the government? So lots of ways, right? And we are only beginning to see what this looks like. I think anybody in this room, you guys have as good of a guess or better than we do for sure. Just a quick survey, so we understand who our audience is here. How many people are working with AI and ML in the government space today? Two, right. Who's working with AI and ML but maybe not in the government space yet? Okay. Who's working in the government space but has nothing to do with AI and ML? Who's working with people or companies who do this type of work? Well, that's excellent. Okay, so this is kind of where we all need to have eyes open. The ripple effects for this technology we really have yet to discern, right? But in terms of the capabilities that we bring, AI ML is great for automating stuff that humans don't want to do. Repetitive, boring tasks at scale. Paperwork, if I could get rid of all my paperwork and working on it, that would be fantastic. And it's better for productivity, it's better for morale. So there's millions of use cases that large bureaucracies are just inherently bent toward when it comes to this technology. We're able to, as James was talking about with Facebook, Meta hiring 17,000 hours to look at posts. Well, you can do that, it's great. But especially if you're talking about financial data, for example, you've got more data generated on a daily basis than you have analysts able to look at it, right? So you're able to tamp down on things like fraud. The intelligence community is able to look at more data that come from an increasingly populous number of sensors, right? We just keep getting more data. More and more of the world, as we know it, is available in digital format than we have human eyes to look at it. So I think that's kind of where we see this technology being used as a strategic level, a national strategic level asset. So when you see things like autonomous vehicles being used to patrol the Pacific, South China Sea, the skies all around, Horn of Africa, the Gulf, etc. All these things are made possible by this technology. Is very much a geopolitical factor. So much so that we see, chip exports controlled now. Lots of NVIDIA's top H100 chips are over going to China, right, and other associated countries as well. James, you worked at Anduril for a bit.
Yeah, I was 2 years at Anduril. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that startup, but they are, $10 billion now. They're one of the new firms that kind of compete with Northrop and Raytheon, but they're getting their technology and hardware out. Instead of, Northrop's old model of 10 years and we're going to have the F, whatever number plane out, they're getting things out in 1 year, even with all the government, slowness. And they're actually doing it. There's things in Ukraine right now that they're using. And they're using the latest and greatest AI and ML to do that, to bring that innovation into the government. They've done it successfully so far. And there's a few other companies that are newer that are following the Anduril model. So they've created kind of a template to bring in and really help the government with this new technology. As it's coming, I like to think of it as there's research papers coming out every day from universities. And so you could gauge a government on how well it's functioning based on that research becoming practical in use in the government, right? How long does that take, right? And I know this personally because we're doing the same thing, evaluating other countries that way, looking at China. You can see, based on what they're researching in their universities, what they're going to be having 5 years from now, right? And so that's where I see the U.S. is actually accelerating with that. So it's really good to see.
So,
All right, so not a question, just an observation, but back to the first bullet point about automating tedious tasks. You support a large agency, and I was surprised last week when they put out policy guidance on allowing staff to use Gen AI tools, specifically ours, OpenAI, Grammarly, and all you had to do was ask your supervisor for permission, and then you'd be able to use that, provided you're not releasing sensitive information to the tool. But it was interesting because it seems to, a lot of times it takes a while for that to percolate up, and it was already there. So.
absolutely. And actually, you just beat us to the punch on the next slide here.
No.
Yeah, no, great lead. You're on the payroll for the next slide.
So we planted.
Yeah, nice, yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So to Matt's point here, I'll skip down to the fourth bullet. How is the government reacting? We are seeing some fast reaction, which is awesome. I haven't seen any sort of quick reaction like this from the government before, over 20 years in this space now. And so different agencies are authorizing not no holds barred use of this technology, but with approvals, with the caveat that you will, thou shalt not upload government information to the platform, but it can certainly help you proofread emails. It can help you automate, tedious repetitive tasks, spell check, you name it. We're seeing this used already, and it's really fantastic for summarizing documents, for taking meeting notes. Microsoft's Copilot has become more robust over the past few weeks. Even they've kept releasing new beta versions of that as well, and that's really just a virtual assistant that can actually assist you now instead of the little dancing paperclip that we used to have in Microsoft Windows 95 and Windows.
I want a smart clipping, I want to come back with it, actually do the job.
Let's talk after this. So that's kind of at the more tactical level. At the higher echelons, NDA, National Defense Authorization Act, of course, happily made some provisions to increase research and development, as well as technology insertion efforts at the budgetary level across not just DoD, but the federal government as a whole, as well as implementing controls on exports. Right, as we mentioned, a lot of NVIDIA's top chips aren't available to the whole world anymore. That was a strategic initiative to inhibit the growth of competing nations. Executive Order 14110, safe, secure, and trustworthy development and use of artificial intelligence. I'm surprised nobody came up with a better acronym for that. But you know, it's the White House's initiative to really lay the groundwork for how we're going to move forward with this technology going in the future. You know, I am pleased that they got out as quickly as they did. Again, we are seeing things move faster at the government level, at the federal level, than I have previously. You know, it's almost as if they're inspired by the pace of this technology itself, and people are waking up and saying, hey, you know, we can either get on board and get our arms around this, or we'll get left behind, and that's absolutely right. So that framework really charges agencies with coming up with a deliberate plan to address the safe, secure, ethical development of AI, and specifically that charges NIST with setting up a set of standards and frameworks for safe, responsible AI development too.
Is it on the agencies themselves are they developing their own plans as well?
Yes. Yeah. You know, it's, the federal government, we like to nest plans underneath plans, and that's exactly right. Yeah. And then, you know, kind of finally, what we've mentioned up here is the Bletchley Declaration. That was a consortium of 28 countries met in England. Terrible place with horrible people. To more or less just say, hey, we don't know, we don't have all the answers right now, but what we're going to do is make sure that we're all in some sort of sync to not create either Skynet or the Matrix or whatever AI is going to take over the world. They're going to try to avoid that.
It's one thing
Yeah.
into you know, the scary side of this. There's a good news piece on Skynet is every single DoD related agency, they're keeping human in the loop on the kill chain, right? Because we do have to fight wars, and we are ensuring that the entire path of finding the bad guy, getting the bad guy, that there is going to be a human in that process, right? And that's been mandated by the DoD, thank God.
Right. Right, and then that was also part of the Bletchley Accord as well. Yeah. So, yeah. Any questions or thoughts on this? Sir?
How can you control other countries like, say, North Korea or Khomeini or, you know,
you
Saddam
can't.
Hussein? You can't.
Yeah, that's why, you know, we have to keep one eye open, and actually keep both eyes open. There are extensive programs, as James mentioned, to monitor that to the best of our ability. But the closest thing that we can do is things like the semiconductor export constraints, right? Not letting some of those countries get the most advanced chips. That's not going to stop anything, but it maybe adds some time to the development, just like nuclear weapons, right? So you try and control the precursors to that. It doesn't mean that you can't set up an indigenous enrichment facility, because you can. But it'll take longer to generate that uranium, right? So in machine learning, you have to do training, which is kind of the proxy to enrichment for nuclear weapons. And that takes massive.
I'm going to use that.
So I just came up with it, right? And that is it's resource intensive. You need expertise, you need power, you need the ability to scale that training as well. So again, there's no way to really do it though. You know, it's open source. The underlying technologies are out there, and so it's really a case of figuring out to the best of our ability how to detect it and how to prevent it. Because, in my opinion, you know, it's just a matter of time before other nations, other capabilities, other non-state actors have access to something that can really do some harm to our critical infrastructure, especially. So that's why, in parallel to developing these technologies, we're doing things like post-quantum encryption, you know, things to protect against the next generation of computing capabilities. Sorry, it's my long-winded, way too long-winded response to that. But yeah, there's no way to really stop it.
I would add a final note, just in general. The thing that worries me most in terms of the human loop on AI in general, if you've ever looked up hypersonics, and those are coming in the next 5 to 10 years, you will have 30 seconds or less to react to a missile coming from any point in the world. So a human reacting in 30 seconds, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but you know, it's going to be mass panic when we get to that point. So there's hopefully going to be a similar type of deterrent that we have with the nuclear age for the hypersonic age.
Wow, you're really starting the day off right here.
Sorry.
I'm not going to take a break. All right, what challenges does the government face? Lots. But again, in lieu of in light of all these challenges, you know, I think it is very heartening to see the pace of reaction that we have seen already. You know, for a massive bureaucracy, like James said, we are seeing glimmers of hope. We are seeing bright people in the right positions making good decisions. We're seeing advisors who truly understand this. They're actually being listened to. Not always, not consistently, but I think it's pretty good. As we've been talking about, this technology is available to everybody. And it's a double-edged sword, as James mentioned. So that means that anybody can create a solution for this and sell it to the government. That's great, and that's terrible, because you can have lots of people who have really no business making something that sounds really cool, they know what to say, and because they've downloaded a model that can generate something that looks cool, it doesn't mean that it's effective, and it could be harmful. So, there are lots of AI startups, as James is keenly aware, as we've all probably started to see, whether you're in government or government support services or in any part of this industry or in a radius of the 495 loop, you probably see at least a dozen new AI startups in one way, shape, or form. And that's great, but it needs to be done responsibly. And so that, I think, is an upcoming challenge that the government's dealing with. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, to not be gloom and doom with the last statement.
Yeah, right.
I was recently working with the State Department on some boring data analysis stuff, and it was the first time that I got to see, in my 22-year career, where an agency being very thoughtful about what technologies they were buying off the shelf, and they were actually bringing in experts to evaluate how they're spending money and how they're spending their budget. And maybe I've just been working with the wrong government agencies, and this has been on all along. But that type of thing is just super critical for the AI space, because it's going to be more expensive for AI, probably, right? And then there's more risk involved in the thing failing or not doing what they expect it to do when it gets deployed on site, so to speak. There are a few companies that actually, a few startups that are really, really doing a good job with this. I mentioned Primary AI before. My boss there, believe it or not, started Yurts AI, which existed for 4 years. They are actually bringing AI to government in a very smart way, bringing a model platform to the government to test out and use and get on pilots with for other companies to use as well. I thought it was a brilliant idea. And so it's kind of like mitigating the risk of the spend on that, and allowing them to be thought leaders and bringing expertise in with them, right, in terms of services as well. So
Yeah, which kind of leads into our next point is implementing some of these technologies at the enterprise scale. So if you're looking at a whole agency or a whole department, these are massive organizations of organizations of organizations. And when you have the ability to create a unique, bespoke, generative AI chatbot or some sort of solution, again, it's great that small organizations can do so relatively cheaply, but then you run into how do we normalize and regulate how they're used? What data access do they all have? Where does the data that they generate go? How is it handled? Different offices and different types of data need to be handled differently. We've seen this especially in the Department of Homeland Security, where you've got different tribes of law enforcement underneath that, each with different titles and authorities. So, beyond that part of the technical implementation and policy implementation, you also can have massive costs. Instead of developing, just like any other technology that we see here, whether it's a cloud service provider or just storage or something that's really ubiquitous. The next thing I think we need to figure out how to do is how to buy these capabilities at scale, in terms of not building something unique from the ground up for every organization and office. How can you achieve some commonality, some cost savings, performance savings from a bit more in a strategic manner instead of just a one-off reactionary spending? Any thoughts on that?
I think you nailed it.
Yes. Thank you. And of course, risk management. With so much data, the OpenAI models have trillions of data points, trillions of parameters in that. It's trained over massive swaths of the internet, and the internet is not always a fair and safe place, right? So you have to assume that a lot of the training data used is maybe it's inherently biased. Maybe it has some assumptions that aren't correct, and we end up making government policy decisions off what ChatGPT said. Not necessarily a good idea. Right? Human in the loop. Right?
To hit home on the bias issue, there was I think an article in Wired maybe a year ago where researchers found out in terms of the facial recognition and what they were using for it, but they realized there was definitely bias in race in the models themselves, and they realized it was totally accidental because they were scraping flavor, right? And it turns out that they were scraping the images in their data set didn't represent enough across races, right? So that was even Meta being aware that, like, oh crap, we have to fix this, right? And you got to wonder what other biases you're going to be in these models that we haven't even been like, oh crap, we need to react to this, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just being aware of that,
Right. Yeah.
So pulling thread on the security part, I've come from a computer background where you have a program, it compiles it, you get a result, there's something you execute, and you can go through the whole process and repeat it again and again. With these AI models, you don't have that. You have training data that is used to train the model,
Precisely.
and then you get an output that is non-deterministic. It's different each time, and I wonder what your thoughts are on how do you ensure that. And you joke about like having ChatGPT helping you make a decision, but ultimately that is what will start happening.
Oh, I do already.
Every day, right?
Yeah.
These models will start to influence decision making, and so how do you ensure with this opaque black box that perhaps has bias, that has other inputs that we aren't aware of, to ensure ethical, safety, privacy concerns? That to me, I think, is the biggest challenge with the
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and a great point. So, what we are seeing more of is I think a lot of consumers are definitely worried about that very, the black box concept, right? You see something go in, magic happens, and you get something out. We want to know what that magic is. And where, some parts of that magic in the model, I think will remain proprietary. What we are seeing more of, even through ChatGPT, is that it will start saying, hey, you ask for a summary of X, here's the summary, here's where I got these data points from. And I think that I hope that proliferates. I think the real special sauce that OpenAI has is actually the models that figure out how to put those pieces together. So I'm hoping that the knowledge that it's pulling from becomes increasingly transparent as this technology evolves as well.
For me, it's really more of a comment. When we used to be in college and I'd do a research paper, and I'd say, like I researched one time in a bank and wrote a whole thing on it for my 500 class, I had to cite everything. What I think is really important is for us to be able to look under the hood of an important issue and say, okay, how did you show me your work, show me your homework? How did you come up with this decision for me?
Wow.
And therefore, I can look under the hood and be able to say, oh, okay, you relied on this article or these 500 articles, whatever it is, but at least I have an idea of what is the basis for your decision making. So then I, as a human being, can say, okay, I'm cool with that, or wait a minute, you only read Wired magazine and you based everything on Wired magazine, and frankly, the guy who wrote this article, we know he's on the take with so-and-so, and therefore I don't think that that's a legitimate decision.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what you're both talking about is actually an emerging field called explainable AI.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to hit on that. Yeah, so yeah.
Go for it.
So yeah, explainable AI was actually it was a buzzword in government like a few years ago, right? I don't know why
It's coming back.
It's still coming back, yeah, right? And it was, again, going to conferences and stuff like that, maybe seriously 2 years ago, everything was about explainable AI in the government space, right? And seeing them talk about that. And it was actually reactionary from, you can imagine they had these black box models they were eager to use, but then they were getting different outputs on them. I was like, oh, how do we deal with this, right? Classic. And so you actually have a few startups right now that are developing explainable models that through there's seriously research papers coming out of the university right now, and I don't want to keep saying this, but they are working, and not to get too geeky on it, but at the layers of the transformers levels where the sparse matrices are collapsing on themselves from multimodal to two-modal graphs, they are able to get human readable content from those binary bits at those stages.
Good.
And that's, I think, that's one path ahead. Besides, yes, what I love about the models currently and what they're integrating in right now is you do get the sources, which is amazing, right? And I definitely click on all the sources, right? And this is not pitch for antibiotic, but the whole thing that I'm doing is related to getting clarity to humans of what they're reading online in general, not just using models, right? Because that's getting worse and worse and scarier and scarier, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and you really got geeky there with your collapsing matrices. Just to paraphrase, using my nerd powers here, is that along the way, the model, the AI/ML model is really, it's figuring out and being able to explain how it progressively thinks, right?
Thank you, it's much better. You're better at solutions than me.
That's just simple. All right, how does this concern you? Well, I think all of us in this room understand, at least in some way, shape, or form, the societal impacts, right? This can either make our jobs a lot better. Sometimes it can force people to get different jobs. There's a lot of disruption, I think, on the way. In the federal government, though, I think it's safe to say that we have not realized the full potential, right? There's lots more use cases that we haven't even begun to imagine. So if you understand this technology, if you understand what problems that maybe a specific agency is facing, Whether it's a shortage of personnel, whether it's a lot of data, perhaps you can come up with a solution to solve one of those problems, or at least to mitigate it. As Matt was talking with automation, this is hopefully a way to just improve a lot of the capabilities, as well as pulling humans up to the decision making on sort of copying and pasting from spreadsheet to spreadsheet. Agencies are scrambling to research and to catch up. As we've mentioned, there are a lot of initiatives through research consortia. There's a lot of broad agency announcements, which is kind of like a come one, come all, pitch us your ideas, contract vehicle. There are a lot of IC, intelligence community, and Department of Defense initiatives in very niche areas, especially when it comes to identifying what foreign capabilities are as well. So we are seeing a pretty large grassroots movement of trying to adopt and implement this technology as quickly as possible. James, what do you say?
Yeah, just real quickly, there's I'm friends with the founder of the startup called Ultron AI, and what they're doing is really basic. Think about every government agency that's putting out those EAs, that's putting out those RFPs. Their entire platform is built on proprietary models that, it allows them to go from 1 month to put out an RFP to, let's say, a few hours. Right? And you can imagine every single government agency, if they're successful, will use this platform. So just things like that, and they're kind of more niche, like you were saying, but that's where I see that's going to be very powerful. And it's just like how long is it going to take?
I think another trend that we are seeing is that the development and evolution of this technology is outpacing our ability to understand it. And that's not just in the government space, I think that's everywhere. But I think where that's keenly aware is it's imperative that our government has access to the latest and greatest in AI and ML technology. And it's a matter of national security in its simplest form. And the ability and the capabilities for us to both understand that, to keep up with it, as well as procure it is a challenge as well. We've mentioned that a lot of this is going on and it's effective, but the pace of development, what we see is only increasing. So that means that our procurement of these solutions has to get faster as well. So that is one good thing about your friends at Voltron, being able to speed up the procurement process. But proceed in the process as well. I think the traditional sales cycle is still measured in months and years, where we need to be in days, which is a big decrease. Sorry, Joey.
Now, just another question, might be doom and gloom world, but the whole point of it is that, we talk about our side.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the rest of the other countries are developing their own version of this. Is there any way you guys can talk a little bit about that? And is that going to be, the clash of the AIs in the future type of deal?
It may be, James.
Do you have a clearance?
No.
No, I can say briefly that I went to a roundtable discussion at AFCIA at the Country Club in Pentagon a month ago, mainly for the free lunch. But it was on digital twins in China, if anyone's familiar with the concept. Apparently,
So real quick, a digital twin
thank you.
is a replication of something that exists in the real world in the digital world. So it could be this building, it could be a CAD model, except just on steroids.
Yeah, and so in terms of digital soldier, digital twins, and U.S. technology digital twins, think about, anything that other countries have that they know about the U.S., everything from blueprints, things like that. Hypothetically, apparently, China is way ahead of us in that. So there's a lot of applications on that. But that's typically I suppose.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the biggest constraint right now is a case of imagination. So that's what our best and brightest maybe us to work on. So.
Quick question. So I was telling my wife, she works in the contract department at PDIT. And I was telling her about the presentation this morning, and she said, ask if I'm still going to have a job in 5.
Yes. I think as James said, human in the loop. Hopefully her job just gets more enjoyable. Having spent plenty of time just dealing with contracts myself, having to read through all of the fine print, you get to the point where your eyes dry up and you start hallucinating. Maybe my threshold is a lot lower than yours, but what she hopefully spends more of her time doing is, telling an AI to do the stuff that she doesn't want to do, and so she can spend more time talking to people, whether it's internal stakeholders or customers, actually figuring out real problems instead of doing the infinite number of contract required deliverables, and so it is a little bit. Sorry, I'm holding my own PTSD.
I sat through her going through an acronym list once, and I was that. This
Once is enough. Yeah, don't worry, we've got an app for that.
Yeah, I can't tell how many times I've summarized, research papers for myself now. Save me time. Give me the 5, who, what, when, where, how about this thing so I can find the next thing. What I read recently to answer the question from my standpoint is that the people who are going to lose their jobs are the ones that don't understand the tools that are coming out to use them.
Yep.
Right? That's the only risk. So I would say the best thing to do is to be an early adopter. If you have been an early adopter before new tech, I would say I'm kind of a mid adopter, even though being kind of geeky. Be an early adopter and get to know these tools and stay up to date with them as the velocity increases on these things. And there's no risk. You're actually just going to kind of 10x yourself on all this stuff with AI, right? And then get to the fun things. The future is we become craftsmen again. Our hobbies become the things that we're actually doing. Everything's automated, Jetsons, which will be great.
Yeah, that's right. We've been waiting for the flying cars. So, yeah, excellent. So,
I do have a quick question. You guys have this, agencies are still struggling to effectively procure AI and ML. What's kind of your, what do you look for when you're looking at a company on the public side who claims to be doing AI and ML? What are the keywords or what are the things that you would look to validate, at least from an initial glance, that they're really doing AI, ML, and some of these hiring capabilities?
great question. So it's not going to be what they're saying they're doing, it's what's under the hood. Everybody who's selling this technology now, they probably know the buzzwords, or at least they know enough of them to sound like they know what they're doing. So it comes down to what they say that they do, but it also comes down to what they say that they don't do. So much of effective AI and ML, I think, is based on the nuts and bolts that nobody really wants to deal with. We were talking about this a bit earlier. Data engineering, the mathematical proofs, the true algorithm design that goes into it.
The pre-cleaning of all the data.
Yeah, the really boring pre-processing of data, distributed learning, the things that that James and I maybe enjoy too much. You have to do that stuff right. You have to understand not just the thing that you're trying to output, the text in case of ChatGPT, but you have to understand where that is going to come from, how you're going to learn and train something.
So if you were a government agency right now that was evaluating a company that's claiming something, would you say that's technical due diligence is a critical piece?
Yeah, and that's a great question too, because a lot of the policy that is coming out, that was I think in the executive order, I think it was in NDA as well, and certainly from NIST, is how can we truly test this, right? So testing models, testing AI ML is a key part of that. It's part of the development. You always see part of your data that you're using to train, part of it gets set aside to validate. So you compare the knowns against the unknowns. So it's a combination of things. You have to do that level of due diligence. You have to see how I would want to see how that company did their testing and validation through the model development and training. I want to know what data that they use to do that training. I want to know how they pre-process it, and it's the underlying building blocks of that I want to look at.
And then, from the macro level, I'll give you an example very close to my heart. The past 6 months, I'm working for a company called Finch Computing until April. We rebranded as Finch AI.
Okay, that's cool.
And and we suddenly became an AI company, right? And so the Wayback Machine is your friend, right? Which, if you haven't used it, it scrapes the internet constantly, gives you every single version of every single site, back through, what, not 90s?
98.
98, right? Yeah. So, looking for that shift, and it doesn't necessarily mean you don't hire Finch, you just make sure, and because it turns out they actually have 12 patents on NLP, right? And so, in this case, they're actually some of the best of breed for doing that type of analysis. But it's just being aware of that in the context of macro.
And then just to follow up, when you think about it, AI and ML, is this going to be sold going forward on a service basis, or is this going to be solution based?
Both.
Okay.
So you see it also as the as-a-service model right now, software as a service. But you also see, my company, Syntax, we're not really a platform or an as-a-service company. We use, in most cases, open source technology, open source software, to save ultimately the government or the client money in terms of not having to start from scratch. So we're able to kind of get a leap ahead, and we still really sell as a service model. As we often talk about, I personally haven't seen a company do both products and services terribly well. But they always seem to kind of clash in whether it's on the books or in execution. But I think you'll see both. I think that's where you have that distinction between your commercial platforms like OpenAI, like Anthropic, and then that will probably always be a platform as a service type company. And then you see smaller companies like us, Syntax, mid-tier IT company, and we're able to bring in, whether it's a data lake architecture or if it's a public open source generative AI model, we're able to use that as a way to sell services.
So it sounds like the off-the-shelf platform as a service with AI and ML is actually a lot more risky unless they have in-house staff that know what they're doing.
I'd say-
Right?
I'd
It
say-
sounds like there should
yeah.
be services in the loop anyway.
Yeah, no, I think it really depends on the use case, right? I think in some cases, like what we're seeing, agencies kind of free and clear to use commercial AI for things like repetitive tasks that you're not doing any real decision making per se. It's automation. I think, hey, go cuts, go whatever the cheapest or most effective solution is. When you're doing things like national security or even fraud detection, it's great. You can automate a lot of it. A lot too slow. Oh, it's too slow. Sorry. It's all right. We'll do this old-fashioned now.
There's one slide.
Yeah, one slide there.
Oh,
Sorry, really, I'm broken.
No problem. I knew this was gonna happen.
You did call this. You saw.
That's nice.
So the last thing I want to say here is that there are no experts, in my opinion. this technology is too new. James and I, we're not experts. We've got other things that we focus on, but especially in this space, in terms of AI and the federal government, this is an experiment for all of us. And so, if I could just impart one thing, is that, listen to everybody, especially us. You should definitely take us with a massive grain of salt.
That's right.
But keep things in mind that nobody's seen exactly the type of interaction that maybe you have seen with AI in your specific field, or AI in your governance function. So anyway, that kind of takes us to our next slide. Yeah, there we go. That's good enough. Call to action. So sorry, we actually asked you guys to do something here. So when you're going out and learning more about AI ML, read and do the research that you want, listen, absorb it all, but keep in mind that nobody's going to be a master of your domain in this field, because there's probably not somebody who's lived and breathed what you're living and breathing. And certainly not when it comes to the intersection of AI and ML. So this is new for everybody. So, sorry, this is where I get bent up. Make sure that you make your own decisions, and then share your observations, communicate with your peers, with your people around you, because this is something that we all need eyes open on. And I think as a community we can figure out how to embrace AI and the most while mitigating its risks as well. Anything from you, sir?
Yeah.
All right. So now that we've asked you guys to do something, any questions, any thoughts? Sir?
Well, you guys mentioned that now is a time to be proactive in embracing AI tools. Given kind of where you sit within the ecosystem, do you have a list of recommendations and ones that we can quote unquote trust more so than others? Given kind of just the security concerns and frankly the reliability questions we might have.
Yeah. So I think most of the commercially successful ones right now, OpenAI, their ChatGPT, their DALL-E model for image generation, those are two of the most popular. And the other thing is that they also point back to the data, not DALL-E, not the image thing, but ChatGPT will point back to the data that it pulls from. So it's not just saying, here is your answer, it's saying, here's your answer available at this link. And if it doesn't, you can ask it to. And if it doesn't tell you after that, then you shouldn't trust it. And that's probably the same with, that's true with every platform.
Yep.
The other popular commercial AI out there right now is called Claude, from a company called Anthropic.
I'm bearish on Claude. We were using it at Finch. It did not perform well for us. Maybe it's improved.
Well, yeah, I think so. Sort of sometimes we use them once. I think we're going to see different systems, whether it's Google's Bard, which you can use for some things that works well. Then you've got OpenAI's ChatGPT, then you've got Anthropic's Claude. I think all of them are fine to experiment with, so long as you can see why it's thinking what it's thinking, why it's telling you what it's outputting. All of those have been giving links and citing sources.
And that's relatively recent. They weren't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that was the feedback that they got.
Yeah.
And when I said earlier about being an early adopter on these things, it's really that playing around with it, getting to know it, and seeing what the constraints are for each one of them.
Right.
And then you can really, as a human, it becomes like this. It's not like an uncanny valley. It's more like you see where its limits are. You get to know it. It's weird. It's almost like a person's knowledge level that you can see. I have kids, and it's like, these are some of my kids, and this is how I'm going to talk to this one. This one do this one. Or it's very. it's a new feeling that I haven't had before, right?
You've got 3 more kids.
Yeah,
You've got
it's
Claude,
very
you've got
weird,
ChatGPT.
but it's so useful for certain use cases for what you're trying to do with it. But that's why, like, getting to know them to that level of like, oh, I broke this one, it's not giving me the right response, I don't trust this for this thing, right? That's going to be personalized for each human that's going to understand that, right? So you can't really give a blanket statement about that. It's more like definitely spend the time to get to know.
Yeah, and for me, so I bounce between different services and play with the open source models as well. I use Google Bard really quickly because I don't have to do any extra clicks. It just kind of opens up and I can just ask something. But I know it's probably not going to be as reliable or as robust as if I take a few extra seconds to log into OpenAI, ChatGPT, but I have to do a little bit more work. But it's better, more robust responses. And then if I've got a larger document that I need to work with, then Claude is historically has been able to handle larger documents. So they have different strengths, and those strengths will keep evolving. So I would say, check them all out periodically, because this pace of development is crazy. But great question.
If you do want some specific thing that you can download and use if you're writing something down, GPT for all, it's all one word, and the 4 is of course the number 4, because that's what startups
That's what we
do.
do.
Yeah. There is a GUI, graphical interface, very similar to OpenAI's, that you have on your desktop then, and you could download all the open source available models and switch between them. And it'll work on your regular machine. You don't need any special machine, you don't need a GPU. It will generate stuff slower, but it will work. And so that's what I use every day as my daily driver. I just keep it open. One of my virtual
GPT for all.
For all?
GPT for all, yeah, with the number 4.
There's another one too that I've toyed with called Oh Mama. I don't know.
Oh, yes,
it's
Along is great.
So
Yeah,
it's like
Along was
the
great.
Docker folks created a client that
Yeah.
behaves like Docker, but gives you a whole list of ones you
Yeah, Oh Mama, I think is that just for Mac?
I think it right now, and they're purporting it to come to Windows eventually.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, any other questions? That was a very good one. All right, and nobody's fallen asleep. I think we might have lost a few people. Well, thank you all very much for your time. Really had a privilege having a conversation with you.
Yes, it's good. Thank you.